Welcome to AI in Design, where we explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping the world of design. I'm Dan Saffer, and my co host is Nick Martellero, and we're both faculty at Carnegie Mellon's Human Computer Interaction Institute. Each week, we break down the latest AI developments, dive deep into topics that matter to designers, and talk with fascinating guests who are right on the intersection of these fields. Whether you're a designer working with AI or an AI practitioner interested in design, we're glad you're here. This week, we're doing a deep dive with Andy Budd, advisor, designer, coach, on the future of AI in design. This is a pretty wide-ranging conversation, and Andy has a lot of thoughts on everything from which designers are impacted the most by AI to who at the launch party is in the corner crying. And a hint, it's not the product manager. Great conversation. We'll be back next week with more news. But first, here's our conversation with Andy Budd. We are here with Andy Budd talking to us about the bull and bear case for design. And Andy, how would you introduce yourself these days? What do you do?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think people have been asking me my entire career, what do I do and what's my point? But I guess I am a reformed designer who now coaches design leaders. I do a lot of design leadership coaching, and I also advise startup founders in the VC world. And I have a book all aimed at kind of like startup growth called The Growth Equation. So it's kind of 50% of my time is helping navigate design leaders through all the craziness that's going on at the moment. And then the other 50% of the time is with startup founders.
Is it usually designers that you're working with as startup founders, or is it all different kinds of
Yeah, in
founders?
the startup world, it's everybody. So I work for a VC fund called Seedcamp, which is one of the top 3 VC funds in Europe. And the founders come from all kinds of backgrounds. Typically a lot of founders are engineers. There's also a good number of founders who come from the world of business and corporate. Actually, there aren't that many design founders out there. I think San Francisco has quite a bunch, but they are still a fairly rare beast. And actually, weirdly, one of my goals of getting into the VC world was to try and encourage more designers to become founders. And so I spend a lot of my time. And I think a lot of the reason why people reach out to me as a coach from the designer perspective is they're really curious about this world of entrepreneurism. And it might be a topic we're going to come on shortly, but I think this has massively ramped up in the last kind of, you know, 9 months where designers are now able to much more scratch that entrepreneurial itch.
Yeah, it's funny because both Nick and I, over the last year or two, have really been pushing that for our students as a viable career path to not just go into big tech or big bank or whatever, but to actually be more entrepreneurial. That is a viable way to go. And particularly, as you're saying, now in the last year, the tools have gotten good enough to really make that happen. And Nick himself is working on a new startup.
Yeah. I mean, this is it. Look, again, it's something we're going to get into, but I honestly believe that we reached peak designer somewhere kind of middle of the pandemic. So 21, 22. And by peak designer, I mean the maximum number of designers the Western world at least will ever need. And then the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen multiple rounds of layoffs. Lots of these big tech companies massively expanded when money was cheap and prevalent, and they've now massively tightened their belts. And this was before the AI kind of boom really kicked in. And so the thing I'm questioning at the moment is like, I think we've reached the peak. I don't know where it will settle. Will it settle at 95% of the maximum? Will it settle at 80% of the maximum? Will it settle at 60 or 40 or 20? Who knows? But I think we've definitely at that peak. And so I think there are going to be lots of designers out there who are competing for more jobs, fewer jobs than there are designers. And I think entrepreneurism is a really viable route. I think that, again, from the VC world 3 or 4 years ago, if a designer came to you and wanted money, you'd be like, well, where's your technical co-founder? Who's going to build this thing? Now we have the tools at our fingers. I'm seeing so many of my designer friends, particularly, designer friends who have been design leaders for many years, who are now building and exploring loads of their interesting apps on the side. And so it's really unlocking the ability for people to be curious, to be playful, to not have to invest a ton of time or money into starting a business. And, you launch a thing, you stick it up there. Maybe you get 5 users, maybe you get 5,000 users, maybe you get 500,000 users. And then, once you found that product market fit, then maybe you can go and start building a team around it. So I think it's giving people a lot of optionality. And I think particularly, say a lot of people I know have been made redundant. If you're sitting around for 6 months, if it's taking you 6 months to find that new job, upskilling AI skills and building and shipping a product is a really, really good way of spending your time while you're waiting for some AI HR bot to like review your portfolio. You're waiting for your AI bot to apply for the thing that the other AI bot is judging, can just go and start playing and experimenting on the fringes. So yeah, I think it's an interesting, brave new world.
One of our guests recently said, yeah, this is the golden age of side projects where everyone's doing a side project because you can just fire up a Claude or Codex or any of the others and just start to work on things.
Yep.
So let's get to the article. Can you lay out the bull case and the bear case? What are those two things as we look ahead? And I'm guessing this is a short-term view, right? Imagine this is going to all play out in the next year or so, right? I mean, this wasn't a long-term vision. This was
No.
probably something that's going to happen soon.
Yes. Okay. So in all honesty, it was just a bit of a silly LinkedIn-y type article. A lot of the finance world talk about the bull case and the bear case, the bull being the positive outcome, the bear being the negative. And I just thought it was quite a catchy title. But really, what the article was showing is we are in this weird Schrödinger's design career where we haven't opened the box yet and we don't know whether the design industry is alive or dead yet. And hopefully, you're right, in the next year or two, a new shape will form. Actually, before I get onto the bull and bear case, because you mentioned something there, I wrote an article around the same time called The 6 Levels of Adaptive Software, which I actually think really defines where we're heading. There are 6 levels of driverless car. 0 is basically you drive it yourself. 5 is that it automatically drives everywhere. I think people say that Waymo is a 4, and the Uber, Tesla thinks it's a 4 or 5, but really is probably a 2. I think that is ultimately where we are heading with a lot, but not all of design. I think at the moment we are sort of at level 1, where design teams are starting to explore around the edges and automate certain parts of the process. I think very quickly we will start to have systems that run human out of the loop multivariate tests in the background. At the moment, if you want to do a multivariate test, a product manager or designer will come up with a test, they'll come up with the screens, and you will run it through your multivariate testing system. Because most systems have quite or most companies have quite a sophisticated design system, you don't really need a designer to actually assemble the parts of the multivariate test. And actually, if you've got a smart AI that's looking at all of your analytic, there's a really good chance that the AI can come up with tests. And actually, I'm seeing startups are doing just that. In fact, I'm seeing startups that know their system could run completely autonomously, but at the moment, product managers don't feel comfortable trusting it. And so they're basically kind of crippling it. They're almost saying, hey, look, we have self-driving at the moment, but people don't feel comfortable self-driving. And so we're going to just do like lane assist or speed, whatever. I think the first or second level, I can't remember which the levels were, but very soon we're going to have automated multivariate testing. Once we've got automated multivariate testing, then we can say, well, look, multivariate testing is usually done for one user group. Why don't we self-optimize for 5 or 6 user groups? Rather than having a single local maxima, why don't we have 5 or 6 local maxima? And so you start pushing out different designs for different user groups. Eventually, everybody will be a user group of one. Because, the same way as Netflix, back in the old days, if I wanted to program a day's worth of TV, a human would have to program that and decide what came on where. Now I go to Netflix and the Netflix algorithm knows me, knows what I like, generally gives me a really bad set of suggestions because even after 20 years, Netflix and Amazon are still pretty bad at this, but it's better than what terrestrial TV does. I think we're moving to that way with design and AI, where I will come to a system, come to a shopping experience, let's say, and based on what the website knows about me, what the app knows about me, will assemble on the fly an interface pulled from all the component parts it has. It will know I'm in the UK, it will know what credit card I have, it will optimize the checkout flow. It will know the clothes I like. If it's a clothing site, it might even have an image of me, and so it might pop me in a 3D avatar of the clothes so I see what it looks like myself. So in this world, we're moving to this world where I think these systems will just design themselves. And so I really think in 5 to 10 years, maybe 15 years, a lot of the big sites will be self-automating in the same ways in the manufacturing world. We talk about dark warehouses or dark manufacturing plants where there's so many automated robots and so few humans that you can turn the lights off because the robots just work without any humans there. We are moving to a world of dark product teams where the product team is an AI that does all this for you. So this is where I think we're heading. I think that will mean that a lot of people in large companies won't be needed to do the design and product management role. I think there will always be smaller companies that need that. If you are using a Shopify account, then it will probably do that for you, but there'll be these small and mid-term brands. And so that's the future. But you're right that my bull and bear case is really the now to 2 years. We're in this really weird moment, which we haven't quite figured out yet, whereby if you are a product manager, you can now design. If you're a designer, you can now ship code. If you're a coder, you can now ideate and do kind of customer discovery and synthetic users to figure out what you want to build. And so every single one of these distinct roles in the trifecta is now encroaching and creeping in to everybody else's role. Now, this is really interesting because I think for the designer, up until recently, a lot of designers were incredibly frustrated because we would see the things that were broken on our products. But in order to enact those changes, we had to petition. We had to petition for the product manager to put it on their carefully guarded backlog. We had to petition for engineering to get some time in their budget. We had to petition for all this stuff. And because design typically is lower in the hierarchy and also lower down the discovery chain of product, it was really hard for designers to get any airtime. And if we were ever given a little bit of time, let's give the designers a sprint so they can do a bit of design debt management. Yeah, right. Exactly. So I think a lot of the time, or at least the last 5 or 10 years, design has been relegated to being Figma operators. Somebody further up the chain gives us a PRD. The PRD, our product leaders think it's 90% of the solution. We get it and we realize it's 20% of the solution. So already there's like a gulf there. But we basically dutifully go and try and fill out the PRD in Figma. And, we'll be given a happy path and we design a few, the non-happy paths, the exceptions, the stuff that hasn't been filled in, and then we ship it and we do it again. I think AI changes that because now in a vaguely communist Marxist way, we have been given the means of production. No longer do us designers have to go and ask cap in hand for the boss, can we do this? Now, if we see some design debt and we have the tools and the capabilities to ship it because we're using AI, we can just see that design debt, we can fix a problem, we can put it into production, maybe we can launch it live, or at the very least we put it into some holding pen where the engineers just look at it and go, this is good enough. Similarly, like if we have an idea for a solution, rather than what we used to do is go to a meeting and give a really big pitch deck, or go and try and get 6 months worth of research budget to prove our silly little idea was correct. Now we can go with a prototype that we have created over the weekend. Obviously, so has the product leader, and so has the CEO, and so has the CFO, and so has the CFO's partner, and CFO partner's dog groomer. Everyone's coming. It's almost a Mexican standoff. Meetings now, everyone turns up with a prototype, and then it's which is the prototype that's better. But at the least we can see it. We're not having to go to them and say, hey, can we get permission to do a week-long design sprint? Or can we get permission to get 3 engineers to build a prototype? And so we have much more control of showing viscerally our ideas. And I say, sometimes we might have to still get permission, but increasingly we'll just ship them. And so that for me was the bull case. The bull case is that designers are now potentially, the yoke has been taken off, the manacles have been taken off, and we can ship. The single truth isn't a slide deck, a PowerPoint deck anymore. The single truth is what's live on the website. It's that whole ask permission rather than forgiveness. It's much easier to go to your meeting and say, hey, look, I launched the thing and it's doing really well. rather than going, please, sir, may I have 2 months worth of resource on your already overwhelmed backlog? And so this is for me the bull case. The bull case is, the brakes are off, the handcuffs are off, and everyone is racing to ship. And I think that's really, really exciting. The risk is that we're slightly late to the party, for really good reasons. The models really changed the end of last year, and the engineers were the first people to start using and start shipping them. And then after the engineers, the product leaders got on board because a lot of the product leadership stuff is more thought partnery. It doesn't require dedicated tools. And it's taken a while for the pencils and papers of the world to catch up. And it's taken even longer, arguably, for the Figmas of the world to make something that's vaguely half decent. And so I think a lot of the designers I meet are now 9 months behind and now starting to adopt tools. They're either adopting the engineering tech stack or code or whatever, in which case they are basically becoming design engineers. And that requires a certain set shift. Or if you're a classic UX designer, you have been wondering to try and find the perfect tool set, and you're slowly building out your design tool stack, and you are now getting into being more productive. And so we are a little bit behind. And one of the reasons why I'm running this conference in the UK, Design Plus AI, in September, because I want designers to realize where they are, realize they're a little bit behind, get up to speed really quickly, because I do think there's a little bit of an arms race. I do think people are staking out their territory. And I think if designers don't do it, as has been shown over the years, other business partners will take that away. I mean, most of the designers I know are really nice, ethical, liberal-minded people who have big problems with the way that the training data was captured. They've got big problems with the ethical and moral way that the LLMs have been created. But if we sit around and debate that, someone else is going to eat our lunch. And so I think we need to accept that the horse has bolted, that the data has been stolen and it's been trained and it's there. The irony is, obviously, now all the big LLM companies in America are crying foul at the Chinese open source models, the open weight models, because they're doing exactly the same, which I think is a lovely little bit of Schadenfreude. But I think we need to, irrespective of how we feel about the technology, I do think it's here to stay in some shape and form, and designers need to come in. And so that's the bull case. And the bear case is opposite. The bear case is basically that everyone else, product management, engineering, takes over. They start doing all of the really interesting strategic stuff that we always want to do but never can do. And ultimately design sort of shrivels on the vine. And the main role of design in the future could potentially be the managers of the design system. You might have a 200, 300 person engineering team, and you might have a 5-person design system team that basically manages the design system that all of the engineers and product managers ship. And so I think that is definitely the bear case, that design shrinks down into being little more than the people that look after the design system.
Is that where, quote unquote, taste lives? Taste, the judgment, lives in the design system?
Fiend organized a meetup in San Francisco at the beginning of the year, and Lou Rosenfeld called me out in front of a room full of peers, like, "Oh, Andy, you've got really strong views on taste." And I was like, "Do I?" I wasn't sure I did, because I think taste is a hot topic button at the moment. One of the things I love about designers, we're really good at taking the things we're good at and telling everybody that they're rubbish. Everyone's a designer. Personas are rubbish, wireframes are rubbish, types are rubbish. I think for the last 10 or 20 years, we've basically, all the things we're really good at doing, we've told everybody else they're rubbish. And, the last one before taste was empathy. There was a time when it was like the super skill that designers have is empathy. And then everyone was like, no, no, no. Are you saying that, the product manager or the engineer isn't empathetic? And so we're really good at kind of throwing away the things that are special to us. So my position on taste is this. I do think that over the career, designers get very, very honed in on like a visual acuity of knowing what is cool, what is interesting, what works. Some people could say it's an unconscious competence of the conscious competence, unconscious competence model. A lot of designers get to a point where they just have a feeling for design in the way that the book Miss Smiller's Feeling for Snow has a feeling for snow. Or there was a really great sci-fi book where the main character had a weird acuity to brand. I think it was one of the kind of neuromancery
Yes,
Pattern recognition, yeah.
recognition. Yes.
And so, there is an element of, like, there is something there of some designers just have a really good understanding of what good looks like, because we sit in front of these interfaces day in, day out, and designers are really good at noticing things. You're like, I run around the world and I get annoyed by the world because I'm trying to buy a ticket on a ticket machine and I'm looking at all the things that are broken and wrong. And a lot of the time, that low level stress, we've been trained to spot this, and most of my friends don't even notice it. You can see them getting annoyed, you can see them getting angry, but they're not picking up on what's going on or why. And so I think we have this acute sense of taste, which I think is really important. I think at the moment, taste is not that or the AI world, because at the moment we are living in a world where the a tool basically spits out a medium version of what good's meant to look like. Then, sure, the designer could go, this isn't quite right, I'm going to tweak it, I'm going to tweak it, I'm going to tweak it. And so there is an element of taste there. I think when taste starts to be more important is when the tokenomics change. Because at the moment, basically, you're just constantly one-shotting things design-wise, and, like, it's almost a game of whack-a-mole. Like, something is improving, but then something else, goes bad, and you're constantly, like, wrestling with jelly with this design system. But a friend of mine, a guy called Lissandro, was head of algorithmic design at Nike, still is. And he talked about, this is going back 20 years, I think, when he was designing the track and field shoes for the kind of Olympic sort of sports team. He built a bunch of algorithms that took in the weight, the height, the running style, the surface that these athletes were running on, and basically produced unique shoes for each athlete. But because this was an algorithmic process, it would spit out 100 optimized versions. Every single one of those versions was optimized to be performant, but each one looked fundamentally different. And his job was to design the algorithm. But then, because he was taught and had bathed in the brand heritage of Nike, he would look at the 100 and go, well, those 50 are just completely wrong. Those 20 are really interesting. Those 5, they have the Nike vibe. And of those 5, I'm going to pick one. And so in a multivariant world where you've got designs being spat out, you can, if you have an algorithm that has no, token caps, you can say, like, create 100 versions of this homepage. Then yes, being the person that picks the best designed homepage is a skill. Now, of course, our product leaders and our engineering leaders and our finance leaders all think they also have good taste. They all love their music. They think their Ariana Grande CDs are the best CDs, or they think their Red Lobster bucket meals or whatever are the best food out there. Everyone thinks their taste is amazing. And so this is one of the problems, I think, when people argue with taste, because it does come across as a little bit elitist. And so I think even though I tend to agree that we have that taste, I think it's a really difficult thing to argue, to say, hey, stand back, the head of finance. You don't have anywhere near as good a taste as me. I'm going to be the one that picks which of these 100 designs is the right one for the business. So yeah, it's a tricky situation, taste, I think.
And is this what you're talking about when you talk about plausible design in the article? Is this related to that?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think
What is plausible
it's
design? Let's start there.
I mean, to be honest, it's a while since I actually wrote that article. It was sitting around in my to publish folder for a while. So, but the idea is plausibility. If we live in this multivariate world, there are, at the moment, because we have limited resources, we focus on a single viable option. And, a lot of the design process is around finding the one option. But as you going back to the kind of multivariant thing, like, you used to go into design school and maybe you were asked to design 100 chairs, and you design the 100 chairs and maybe, yes, 10 of them or 20 of them were plausible. And then they all solve the problem, they solve it in a different way, they have different assets or aspects or whatever. And then your job as an organization, if you now pick between 20 things rather than one thing, is to decide which of those 20 things fits the moment, the brand, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I'm meaning around plausibility. If we are able to generate, because ultimately what we're talking about is lifting the resource cap. If we're lifting the resource cap and we can have an infinite level of resources, almost quantum design. It used to be the case that computer programming was either in one state or another. It's either not designed or it's designed. Now we live in this world where we can have almost infinite number of designs that solve the problem because we have no resource constraints when tokenomics come down. And then we have to do the thing that my friend at Nike did, was then pick which is the best. And so, yeah, there's a plausibility. They all solve the problem. They're all plausible, but we've got to choose which one is which. I think that's what I was getting at.
You were saying that plausible design is dangerous because most companies have a real problem. They can't tell what great is versus just plausible.
Gotcha. Okay. It's been a while since I read that article. So good point. Yeah.
I'm
I mean, that's the other thing.
quoting you back to yourself.
No. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is a problem that we've always had. Everybody has an idea. Every product manager has an idea and they go, hey, this seems like the solution. And designers come along and say, well, are you sure that's the right solution? Let's do the double diamond. Let's do 20 other solutions and let's pick the solution that's right and let's test it with a bunch of people. Because we believe that there is one optimal, perfect solution out there, this platonic design. But a lot of the time, as an industry, we don't need the platonic design. We don't need to sweat the details. And so a lot of the time, designers think we are fighting against this'll do mentality. This seems about right. This seems like a good enough fit. I have got my AI agent to deliver something that looks on the surface like design. And again, because a lot of the senior designers have this unconscious competence, it's really difficult for us to argue. Weirdly, I think if you come out of university and you have a conscious competence, you remember you've just literally read Don Norman's books and you've read a whole thing around
Color
heuristics
theory
or whatever.
and
Yeah,
Fitz's
exactly.
law. And
You will go to that because you're fresh out of school and go, actually, this doesn't work. As you get older, you internalize all that. And so now when a slightly more mature designer looks at something, they can look at something and go, that looks great, but it doesn't work. I can't quite articulate why it doesn't work. I just know and feel it. And if they were to go back to the books, they go, oh, yeah, because it's Fitz's law, or this or that or the other. So I think there's a gap. There's a gap between that. It's almost, we used to talk about design theatre 5, 6, 7 years ago. You could argue that, or if you look at, I think it's called Buchanan's 5 levels of design. A lot of our business partners are operating on level 1 or 2. The thing looks good. It has the aesthetic usability effect. It looks good. It looks professional. So it must be good. And what they don't do is then look at it critically, because actually we love our children. And so I've done this one shot. I'm really proud of the thing I've done. I'm going to defend it. And I'm not going to look at it critically. Whereas a lot of designers can come along and go, hey, well, design looks good, but for this case, actually, that combination of form fields doesn't make sense, or the way your eye moves around the page doesn't flow nicely, or whatever the reason is. And so I think we are going to move into this battle where our partners have created something that looks plausible, but there are going to be problems that we see that we are going to have to figure out how to articulate. And I think that is going to be problematic, particularly when the person who is creating this plausible design is higher status than us, is our boss's boss. It always used to be the case in the agency world. There always used to be a joke that you would send 3 designs to your boss and they'd go to the next door neighbor or talk to the barista or whatever, and then they'd come back with something completely different. And that's the world we're moving into, except it's not your neighbor or your partner or your hairdresser that you're showing the designs to. It's an AI system that is ingested all of humanity's design and has a certain quality threshold that it spits out, and it's quite difficult to argue that. To some extent, I think this plausible design might not be that bad, because I think a lot of the time, us designers, like I say, we're trying to argue for the perfect tonic design, and actually, a lot of the time, good enough is good enough. And again, I joke, whenever a project launches, you go and look at the launch party, and the product manager is really happy because they've got the thing out the door. The engineer is really happy because it's working and it's bug free. The leader is happy because it roughly looks like how they wanted it to be. And the designers are over in the corner and they look like you've killed somebody in their family. They're there and they're mourning, and they're really pissed off and they're really depressed. You're like, what's going on? And what's going on is everybody else is seeing the thing that got shipped in relation to what was there before. And what there was before was 5 years old, it was buggy, it was horrible, everyone hated it, and the new thing is much better. The designers are looking at what could have been. The designers are looking at the perfect Figma file that they had before they had to make compromises with HR or the legal team or the engineering team or whatever.
Or the tech stack or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the designers are always slightly mourning what could have been. And I think this makes it even harder in some regards.
You've talked about this, yeah, in Something of yours that I quote a lot, which is that, yeah, designers are often playing chess while the rest of the team is playing poker or something.
Yeah.
Is that the
Yeah.
metaphor? Am I
Yeah.
getting that right? Yeah.
I think we all have a chess mindset. I think we're to blame. You go to university and you're taught the way to do design, and it's the double diamond, and it's heuristics, and it's research, and it's yada yada yada. And we're taught this is the right way, and it all makes sense. It's all logical. It's all. I would agree with it. And so we look at design like a chessboard where weirdly we don't want to make any mistakes. And so we study the board, we look at openings, we review Kasparov's greatest hits. And it means that every move we make is incredibly slow because we don't want to launch a thing that might be broken. We don't want to launch a thing that might inconvenience some people. We want to launch a thing for really good reasons that might be using a dark pattern, or it might be inaccessible, or it might be just suboptimal. And so we're constantly trying to make the best thing possible. And that makes sense, like this is what we think we're hired to do. At the same time, most of our peers, they just want to get things out as quickly as possible. They're working in a company where the backlog is a year long. And they just want to clear that backlog as quickly as possible. They've already decided that all the things in the backlog are great and amazing and to solve the problem. And their job is just to ship, 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 ship. Then along comes a designer and they want to slow things down. They want to investigate. They want to explore. They want to try 20 different other versions of the idea that already has been sat in the backlog for ages. So a lot of the time, our peers look at us and go like, we're a handbrake. What they're wanting to do is they're just wanting to play. They're wanting to play every hand they're dealt, wanting to play it as quickly as possible. They know that most of the things that they launch aren't going to work because 90% of all the features we launch have no effect at all. But what they're hoping is one of them will work. One of them will suddenly take off. People will love that feature, and you'll see it in the stats, and you'll go, well, why do people love this feature? Let's go back, let's double down. And so a lot of our business partners, it's speed of play. It's not around minimizing losses, it's around maximizing the upside. Most of our business partners don't care if the design team spends 2 weeks on a thing and it's crap. They don't definitely want to spend 2 months or 6 months on a thing to make sure that it's perfect. And so it's this poker versus chess mindset that I see constantly clashing. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I just think if we are working against a different culture, we have to understand that first. And we have to realize that there are still some games we need to play that are more of a chess game. But 90% of it, we just need to treat it as poker. We just need to be, we'll do our best, we'll get it out as quickly as possible. It's that whole 20 rule. You get to 80% of quality in 20% of the time. And then the last 20% of quality takes 80% of the time. And it's the last 20% of quality that the designers really love. And it's that 20% of quality that designers are mourning for in the party. But actually, the product manager is thinking, well, if we can get the 80% done in 20% of the time, we can ship 4 more complete feature sets also to 80% in the time it would take the design team want to do the one. So let's just get 4 out, then let's get 4 more out, then let's get 4 more out. And I said at the start of the program, AI is going to automate this. You're now not going to have a bunch of designers saying, hey, look, we need to make this perfect. You would just have a system ticking away in the background, constantly optimizing, constantly killing ideas that don't work, constantly trying different things, and you'll end up with 5, 50, 500, 5,000 versions of your website that nobody has ever, a human apart from the user has ever seen.
I do think this relates back to the permission thing that we were talking about too, is being able to almost have the nerve to launch something, to just go ahead and do it. And I think that there is a reluctance to do that. And you actually say this in the article. You say designers want the influence, but not the exposure that comes with that. And that's all about just having the nerve to put something out there that's not 100% perfect. And
Well, I have this really terrible joke. Like, how many designers does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, first we need to do a 6-month study in the role of light in society. This is how often, or this is how a lot of our business partners see. They just say, hey, look, the light bulb's broken. Can you fit a light bulb? And us designers are going, hey, we've seen conversations with Johnny Ives. We say, hey, maybe the real question isn't like a light bulb. Maybe it's a form of light creation or the ability to see in the dark. And hey, if we step back, maybe it's not a light bulb, it's a candle. Maybe it's a spotlight. Maybe it's something that we've never even dreamed of before. And from a design perspective, that's wonderful. And the product manager is like, I just need the light to be turned on because it's dark and we need to get our work done. And so it's this tension that I see that is constantly frustrating. So, um, yeah, it's this clash of cultures, and a lot of my coaching work is trying to help design leaders navigate through those challenges. But yeah, I do think the AI gives designers the opportunity not only to argue for a course of action, but to actually launch it and see whether it works. Again, I'm bouncing around a lot of design law here, but I love Doug Bowman, amazing guy, used to work at Google. He was asked by the Google engineers to multivariate test the color of a link. And the law goes that he was so frustrated by how engineering driven the Google mindset was. He thought it was a ridiculous thing that you would have to try 50 different versions of the color blue, should just believe in the design authority and it doesn't matter. And so he handed his notice in and left. That's the law. I'm sure there's a lot more to it. And then obviously a few months later, the Google engineers came back and said, well, actually, we tested it. And there was a 0.1% difference between this blue and this blue. But for a company that sees 1 billion users a year or a day, actually that made a statistically valid choice that meant we had, I don't know, I'm making up the number, 50 million more clicks on this link than we had before. And so it's that tension there that I think makes it really difficult, which is also why I think a lot of designers are moving to doing their own thing. Because if you're doing your own thing, you get to make the choices. You can choose whether you want to multivariate test 50 versions of blue, or you can choose that you just want to go with your gut because this is what you want to do. A lot of the designers building their own thing, it's giving them a level of agency, which they haven't had for years. For the last 10 years, like I say, they've been told what to build, they've been told how to build it, they've been told when to deliver it, and that can be really agency sapping. Whereas now, if you want to go out and use Claude Code to build your own little small app or your small business, it's delightful because no one's telling you what to do. So I'm seeing a whole generation of designers falling back in love again with the act of making and building and shipping because they are the ones that are in charge of doing that. And it's really, really great. And it feels really freeing. So I think that's an interesting trend.
In both your bull and bear scenarios, it seems like the winners, if there is such a thing, are more senior designers or senior leads, that it doesn't seem to allow for too much space for junior designers, except maybe when it comes to entrepreneurship, because they don't have that innate product sense that's been built up for years. How do you address that?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember the name of the title, but I wrote an article about this similar thing a while ago. So when the AI boom started, I thought it was going to destroy foundational jobs, early jobs. And I thought that this would be good for senior people, engineers and designers, until those senior people retire and there are no more senior people. Because if you don't have a pipeline of junior people, they never become mid-level, they never become senior. I think the article was about mangrove forests, which are where the little tiny fish go and hide from the big predators and they grow and they get bigger and then they move to the coral reefs. And so I think my thinking was that this would be really problematic. And I think there is some evidence that people are now in certain roles, let's say law, rather than hiring a bunch of junior legal secretaries or associates to go through all of the case law where you learn the ins and outs, you're now using AI to do that. And so I think there are certain industries where that entry level role has been cut out and diminished. Weirdly, though, I think in the engineering world, particularly, maybe design world as well, it's actually the mid level people that I think have been hit the worst because um, a lot of the mid-level people, um, you know, they are maybe, not the best designers in their team. Maybe they're mid-level manager. Maybe they're not designing anymore. They're managing a team of 5 people, but it's not that hard managing a team of 5 people. And so, a lot of those mid-level people are being cut out. And actually, the people they're managing, that maybe 2-3 years worth of experience in their career, you put 2 or 3 year experienced designer next to a bunch of foundation models, and they can actually start shipping designs that are maybe equivalent of the mid-level designer, but at 30-40% of the cost. And so I actually think it's the mid-level people that are getting eaten up at the moment. These are the ones that haven't engaged with AI yet, or they have, but they're just junior with a really good AI stack is indistinguishable from a mid-level person with a really good AI stack. And so you ditch the people in the middle. The other thing that I think is happening is that basically whenever there's a pivot, the things that you knew that made you mid-level aren't relevant anymore, or many of them aren't. In the early days of the web, a lot of traditional print designers moved over to being web designers. And sure, their knowledge of typography was really important, their knowledge of color theory was really important, but they often struggled with the imprecise nature of the layout, the fact that it would look different on different browsers, the fact that the screen would move and would have these sort of flexible systems, the fact that you didn't have this at all. And so you would look at these print designers and thinking, well, actually, you've got 10 years worth of print experience, but 70% of what you've learned is now no longer relevant. And the 30% that you have learned is really useful, but you can actually learn that 30% really quickly. You can get, a book on typography, you can get a book on color theory as a junior. And so there was a time, when probably me and you started where like I was a terrible designer, but I knew enough about it to be able to do as good enough design as a really good print person who was transitioning into being a web designer. And so
Mhm.
I think this is where we are with juniors. Like I'm meeting a lot of younger designers who are 2, 3, 4 years in their career, who are arguably like AI native, who are knowing how to use the tools, knowing how to use a tech stack, are not afraid to get their hands dirty. They're not afraid about titles or UX. They don't care if they're called a UX designer or a design engineer or any of that stuff. They're just getting stuck in and shipping. And actually, they're shipping really, really good work at a lower cost than someone who is maybe should have 10 years more experience. And so I think that is what's happened. I think the middle, like a badly raised souffle, the middle of the design market has dropped. Again, a lot of the people I know, a lot of my friends, a lot of people I'm coaching are that kind of mid-level of designer that are either going, shit, I need to go back to being a petitioner. I've been a design leader for the last 5 years. I haven't shipped. I need to become a player coach. My Figma skills are now relevant. I need to go back and I need to retrain. I need to get better at these AI tools because I need to, very least, I need to manage these people and know what they're talking about. And more likely, my product manager doesn't want a leader. They want someone that can ship. And so I need to be able to ship like the best of them. And so I think the whole nature and makeup of the industries change, not necessarily because of AI, but I think AI has accelerated that.
What do you think in these scenarios happens to? I mean, we've been talking about what happens to people inside product orgs. What happens to the design industry? I mean, as a thing, is it a collapse? Because there's conferences, there's coaches, there's educators, there's a whole group of people that are part of the industry that this is going to affect them. If suddenly there's 50% less designers, that's a big impact.
It is. It's almost like Thanos has come and clicked his fingers, and half of, potentially
The
half of the
snap
design world.
has
Yeah, who knows? I honestly don't know. I say that the bull case is its peak designer is 95%. That's entirely possible. There are plenty of people out there that will look back at past technical innovations and say, every time a new technical innovation has come along, everyone said that jobs are going to be destroyed. And some jobs have been destroyed, but that technology also creates a whole bunch of new jobs. And for some people, maybe they're early to middle of their career, they are around and are flexible enough where they can pivot into from the old role to the new role. And there are maybe some people who are slightly longer in their tooth that don't want to pivot and they will maybe age out. And so there might be a simple transition. There aren't too many people who are doing lead-based typography anymore. There was a time when a newspaper had to have people doing the design using layout. Some of them moved to desktop publishing. Some of them retired. You don't now, some people take it up as a hobby. There literally is, there's a really old heritage press in the town next to me. There's a 300-year-old metal type press. People do it for fun. They letterpress posters because it's fun. So maybe that's where we'll be moving. A lot of people will transition into something new. Maybe everyone will become a design engineer. What happens next? I think there'll be a bunch of boutique designers just love doing it. I know a bunch of people that were heads of design at big tech companies. they've made their money, they run a little design studio, not because they need to pay the bills, because they've got their mortgage paid off or whatever, because they love doing design, and it becomes almost being a carpenter or running a little thrift shop. You're not doing it because you make a lot of money, you're just doing it for the love of it. And so that's one future. It might be that the amount of design that's needed is infinitely increased. It might be, the same way at the moment. Engineers are not being made redundant. There's more desire for engineers with AI skills than ever before. So there's a possibility it might uptick. And there's a possibility it might downtick. There's a possibility this is different. The model I use is most of these sort of technical innovations, we have given up a lower level human skill for higher level human skill. It used to be that you would use physical labor to pump water, and then you attach a horse to the pump or you attach a steam engine to the pump, and now you no longer need to use physical labor. So you can use, you move to using IQ and intelligence. And then you maybe sit in a room full of people calculating things, and then a spreadsheet comes along, and now you don't need this room full of calculators, but then maybe you're using creativity. And for the last 20 years, we've been knowledge workers. We have been using our knowledge built up over 20, 30 years to deliver work. I think AI is a great knowledge work killer, because how can you compete against a machine that has the whole sum total of human knowledge? But maybe we're moving away from knowledge work towards judgment work, which is another word for taste. And so if these systems are still spitting stuff out, there might be need for people that have got judgment and taste to guide what gets built and how we build it and all that kind of stuff. And so I think those senior people will actually move more into a product leadership role, less hands-on, more coordinating, more orchestrating. But I do think there is a world where 90% of design is automated. Now, there's one thing, again, because I'm not putting any value judgment here. If you are a young designer, this is quite scary. But if you're a young solicitor, this is quite scary. If you're a young engineer, this is quite scary. If you're young anything at the moment, it's quite scary. It's really hard to know where the job market will go. I think the skills I'd be teaching my students aren't particular design skills, but the ability to learn, which is arguably what university was always meant to be. I think we're moving into a world where you will probably have to change your career every 6 or 7 or 8 years. Not change your job or change your role, but change your career. And so I think if you are somebody that loves new technology, loves to learn, is incredibly flexible, you might start down a design career path now. And it might, as we know it might last for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And then something else will come along and you will pivot. And that might be a different form of design, or it might be something else entirely. Or you might choose to become a plumber or open a cafe or a bike repair shop or whatever. I'm increasingly meeting people that literally, I had my house painted a couple of weeks ago. There's a guy in the street painting a house. I was like, do you do this? He was like, yeah, I used to be a marketer, but there's no work for marketers anymore. So now I paint houses. I was like, oh, well, come and paint my house. Maybe we're all going to be painting houses in the future. I don't know.
Well, that seems like a good place to end this. But,
Or a
I don't know,
terrifying place to end.
a
I don't know.
terrifying place to end. We're ending on a cliffhanger. Andy, where can people find you? And what else? Yeah, you want to plug anything, your conference?
Yeah, sure. So I still have a blog. I've had it for, I don't know, 25 years now. It's just andybud.com. I also cross post to Medium because a lot of people prefer following on Medium. I'm the design VC and the design coach on Medium. I've got 2 separate Medium publications and I publish there. And I'm on Blue Sky. I'm one of many Twitter refugees still, hanging around on Blue Sky. And yeah, and then yeah, if you're designers and you're living in the UK especially, or Europe in general, you want to come to a really, really cool conference in Brighton on the 25th of September, we're hosting the very first Design Plus AI Summit, and it's aimed at people who are already working in that Design Plus AI space or who are really, really curious. It's not aimed at people who have written it off, but it's aimed at people that are like, I think this is going to be the next where the puck is heading, and I want to see what everyone else is doing. I want to peek under the curtain. There's a lot of hype online. There's a lot of bullshit. There's a lot of kind of posturing, and hopefully you'll come along and there'll be some really good, real conversations with designers and design leaders showing what they're doing, what's working, what isn't working, what's frustrating them, and hopefully it'll just be a really good, positive conversation. And Brighton, which is my hometown, is a lovely place to be. It's beside the seaside. It'll be beautiful weather then. Yeah, I reckon recommend all of your audience should book a ticket over and come down and hang out with us in Brighton.
All right. Thank you, Andy. And thank you, listeners. That's our episode for this week. We'll be back next week with more AI, more design, and we'll see you then.